kind of slow down because I go through this stuff very quickly because I've seen it before. So please, at any time, if you have a question, please stop me and ask a question, because these listening sessions are for you to ask me particular questions to help you formulate your budget request for fiscal year 19. And so sometimes I go too fast, and I think people hear what I say, or sometimes what Dr. Minner says, some people are allergic to numbers. And so for those that are allergic to numbers, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask questions. So please feel free to stop me at any time. I'll be happy to go over. Next slide, Dave. For someone that's new to their campus, this is the budget process that we use. This process was a collaboration between my office, our budget office, as well as the faculty and staff senate. Our primary contributors are our faculty senate. They've endorsed this process. And really what it is to align our strategic goals with our budgeting process. During our HLC visit, we could not demonstrate that we were actually performing that task. However, they believed that we were funding some priorities that aligned with strategic goals, but there was no evidence that we could provide them that said, yes, someone made a request and therefore it got funded. So the first step is to set the priorities. I'll also talk about what's new this year. And then the second step is the listening sessions, which is really for you all to ask questions, get a fiscal update, and then also for us to talk about some deadlines. The next part about it is it goes back to the campus. That's where directors meet with their vice presidents or deans, meet with their chairs. So it's that interaction between those who are responsible for producing their budget requests. So this is a critical part that you need to get that feedback. And at this particular stage, we ask, there is no budgetary limit. So you put what you think is appropriate for your department. As it moves up the various levels, then it'll get reviewed and analyzed, and then priorities will come out from each level. So please sit down. If you're a chair, sit with your dean. If you're dean, sit down with your vice presidents. Your vice presidents, if you're a director, meet with your vice presidents. Okay? And then the final stage is executive review. That's where all the vice presidents will meet, and we'll pitch our priorities to President Minner. After that dialogue, we will go on, and actually in the later November, December, we'll come back with budget priorities for FY19. Any questions? Hearing none. This is what's new this year. This is feedback that we received from various departments. And where the disconnect is once it moved from a chair to the dean, or to the dean, and from the dean to the provost, departments didn't really know what the criteria the dean was using to make their priority. So what we've done is we've agreed that this year that we will provide feedback. The deans and vice president will provide feedback to the department heads in a written form. Also, the deans and VP will hold meetings with their directors. So if you haven't done so, please start scheduling those meetings. And then just in case, as it moves up to different level and there's a request made and you didn't think that your request was given the adequate review, then you have the ability to appeal it to the provost or the vice president. But that has to be done on a timely fashion. Because we got to remember, we're trying to kick out this budget by this fall. So we've talked to the vice presidents, and we will give a request, yes or no, yes I have, and then provide some explanation. At least if departments or the chairs have ideas what the criteria they use, then at least that's still a budget process. Any questions? Jermaine, did you have a question? Oh, she muted. Okay, no question. Next slide. This basically just talks about that whole process, and right now we're in that the discussion between the directors and the vice presidents. We're in step 5 and 6, and then we'll be moving on. I'm sorry, we're at 5, between 4 and 5, and we'll be moving on to 6 pretty shortly, and as we hit October. So just if you need to know for future reference, just go back to this slide and see where we're at. Next slide, please. As part of the step 2, we provide you this listening session, a update on the state appropriations. Well, we've been cut from FY17, $1.8 million. Since 2016, we've been cut $2.6 million. How we've been able to offset that is by raising our tuitions. We had a 12.5 the prior year, and this last year we did a 7.5%. So that's nearly 20% of increase of our tuition. And you can see it reflected within the pie chart. As you look on the right-hand side of the chart, you'll see the 64% of state appropriations. That's actually declined. It used to be 70-30. Now we're 33-64. And we believe that this trend will continue. That state, even though they've been very, very, very generous to higher education as compared to other states, we think this trend of there's just not enough money in the state to go around. So we think that our state appropriations will continue to shrink from year to year. There is some states that this number, instead of 64%, is in single digits. And in many cases, it is in the maybe from low 20s and 30s, and it's also in single digits. I think in Illinois, it's less than, I think, 8 or 7%. Questions? The fiscal update for the state revenue forecast, that there's a hearing held in August of this year in Taos, whereas the taxation and rev, the legislative finance, and also the Department of Finance Administration, DFA, they basically create what they call a consensus forecast. And this consensus forecast basically updates the numbers for the prior year, the current year, and also future year. So in FY17, they were underestimated the revenue, so that revenue has been increased by $140 million. And in fiscal year 18, the second bullet, they're up by $12 million, they've elevated the revenue. So that's about $152 million, which would go to help shore up the reserves. FY19, there's $25 million of new dollars. But what we were told at that hearing is that when the legislators had to balance this last year's budget in fiscal year 18, they used one-time monies to fill those gaps. And so what they're telling us is they're going to have to use some of that $25 million for to shore up those gaps that they basically filled. So in essence, what we're being told that it'll be a flat year for higher education. There may be a little bit of money that will come out, but we don't think it'll be significant for higher education. We may have an opportunity to go and seek some of our special projects tech money or funding for those types of projects or any new initiatives. We'll continue to press to see if we can get some money out, but at this particular stage, we're saying it's going to be a flat year. So we'll basically use FY18 numbers or the revenues that we're projecting from the state. Moving on to the capitalized funds, the general obligation, there's $164 million projected. That's those projects that we submit for, like the trolley building or infrastructure dollars. We have presented to a committee at higher education for the demolition and reconstruction of the facilities building. If you noticed, our trolley building is a very beautiful building, but it's masked by that old 1960 facilities building. So the plan is to demolition that building and then build a building really close to where campus security is on main campus, and build a structure there and basically use that.
So the only building will be visible from.
Exactly. So it'll unveil the trolley building, and then that space where the facilities is located now. So that'll be created into a parking lot, and then facilities will basically move over, and then they'll redo a new modern building for them with modern shops.
We'll tear down the old police.
The old police building will be moved. Yes, Ruben.
Yeah, on the general obligation bonds, do you have an idea of how many are going for the bonds now? 218, I know the light ones are, but, and then usually higher ed, but the senior.
So the question that Ruben asked me, who basically can seek funding for those general obligations bonds? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. So traditionally, it's just been the seniors, or they fund senior centers or libraries for books and other infrastructure dollars. And then higher education gets a lion's share. But this last year, they also added public safety as an additional group that they could fund. So we believe that probably this year, those four groups will actually get a cut of the pie. Probably senior centers, but there's also talk on the senior centers that those facilities are really in good shape. The libraries, there's always concerns about the libraries because you're basically taking a 20-year note for a book that may not last 20 years, so there's always concerns about those particular projects. However, the Library Association has been very, very successful over the past years to continue to get over that hurdle. And then higher education, the talk about there's too many institutions given the size of our state and the population, and therefore should they continue to be funding new buildings and new square footage. And then the fourth, public safety, there's just not enough dollars in the other pockets to basically fund public safety at the level that the executive or the legislature believes it should be funded at. However, something that's not on there that I think may appear is road dollars towards improving our roads. The federal dollars have kind of dried up, and so there's really not a source of funds. So I'm guessing at this particular stage they may be using some of those dollars for some of those road projects. So that's the general obligations. Any other questions on that? Going on to the severance tax bonds, those are basically oil and gas extracts. Proceeds, and it's about 113 million. What tends to happen with these dollars is it's broken in a third. So the governor gets a third, the Senate gets a third, and then the House gets a third. And these are basically what they call the port projects. However, there's sometimes some agreement for statewide projects, and so they may take a portion of it, maybe take say 25 million or something like that, and use it for statewide projects that all three of them agree that it's appropriate. They may use some of that money. But we'll continue to go after this type of money for Highlands University. We've received some money in the past for some vehicles. We have received some for athletics. In fact, some of the money that's helping fix the drainage problem at the new football field is using part of some of those funds. So those are those park projects. One of the things that I need to mention is the risks to the revenues for 19 is there's been concerns by the economists that the reporting that they're getting from taxation and revenue department is that those fluctuation in gross receipts tax seem to be swinging way outside the norm. They're swinging up 30-40%. So 1 month they may look at it and it may be at the reported actuals is maybe 60 million, and then the next month they may drop down to 42 million, and then the next month they may be at 90. So it's been oscillating up and down. So they're really concerned about those primary sources of funds and the oscillation from month to month. Obviously the oil and gas issue for the country, that is a worldwide issue. There's still a lot of surplus. We've heard recently the gas has gone up, prices right now, and that's normally contributed to the refineries that are in Houston. There's still a lot of supply on the market. However, refining that into actual goods is the problem and is causing the increase. So we'll still think that oil and gas will still be at that $48 to $50, maybe $51, $52. The state revenues, when you look at that WTI, sometimes you see that WTI number on, when you look at the stock markets or any of those financial indicators from day to day, if oil's up, the WTI is West Texas Indexy. We use that one or the state uses that number to forecast the oil and gas for the state. However, you've got to take that price and knock off about $6 from that rate. I think this morning I looked at it, it was going to be forecasting right around 49. So we're looking right around $43 per barrel. That's how it would impact the state. The state uses for FY18 used a number of $48 per barrel. That was the WTI. So it was basically, we used the WTI number, the 48 plus 6 is $54 is what we have to be at to be flat within the state. So there's still some concern in that particular area. And then changes to changes to tax laws. There's some proposed changes at the federal level that may have impacts on New Mexico. Also, that's the primary reason for that one. Okay. Sorry about that. Questions? Anyone online have questions? Okay. Moving on. If you look at our state appropriation reduction plus our increase, our normal increase, it's right around nearly $2.3 million. When we proposed the budget for FY18, we were projecting a 3% decline in student credit hours. So if you look at the overall, the 41,346, we're down about 6% from last year. So that's roughly, for every 1%, is about $150,000. So we're basically another $450,000 short of what we were looking at projected dollars coming in. So you add that to the 2.3, we're about right around 2.5 million short of what we were looking from prior years. So we're cautious. We've got to continue to get students and maintain students on campus as well as on our centers. So all your efforts is greatly appreciated. For those who have attended my prior listening sessions, we did correct this head count numbers. We had a duplicate set of numbers and we corrected that one. So this chart is updated and correct. So any questions?
Max, a number of years ago, they were highly encouraging staff to take classes because it helped the numbers. Is that still hold true? Or?
So the question Ruben asked is, many years ago they encouraged staff to take classes because maybe it helped the institution. So I'd say yes and maybe. And I say yes, it helps us in boosting our student credit hours, but maybe not. Because we are using institutional dollars from your department to then pay for the class. So all we're moving it is from one budget to another budget. The maybe piece is that our employees are getting a benefit because they're educating ourselves, and that's what we want to continue to do. And that's a positive aspect of what we're trying to do. The old funding formula used to give us dollars for head count, and that was changed in 2012. Prior to that, we had the old funding formula. Excuse me, we used to get $328 per head count. In addition to, if we exceeded our total credit hours for that year, which is about 74,000. If we exceeded that by 3%, it then increased our base to that new amount and therefore would generate new dollars for us. So it gave us two pockets. It gave us in headcount and it also gave us in the credit hour if we hit that threshold. But since in 2012 they changed the funding formula to just output based, which is a degree completion. So there's a little bit of dollars for student credit hours, but it's really minimal. But we get money for at-risk students. Well, most of our employees are not at risk. Two are not at risk and they're not applying for the FAFSA would categorize them at risk. Two, unless they're getting a degree, that would help us. But if not, if they're getting a non-STEM degree, then it really doesn't help us. It helps us in degrees, but not really overall. And since the state doesn't have any new monies to reward the institutions for an output, there's really going to be no monies because it's still flat. So that's why I said yes and then maybe. Okay.
Thanks.
Yes.
Kind of a related question. When the staff want to take a class, then they can reduce their work hour to 36, something like that? Is there a release time to take that course?
The question that Dean Lael asked is if a staff member wishes to take a class, does it change their work hours to 36 hours? I guess if they're taking a 4 credit hour class. I think you have to look at the policy to see what it is. I think there's depending if they're exempt or non-exempt staff. If they're non-exempt, then they have to forego their breaks.
Right.
Okay. And if they're exempt staffs, then there's an expectation that you're always going to exceed 40 hours per week. So it probably balance out. However, with the new unions, we got to be very careful within that because that's considered a working conditions. And since we're in the formation of in the formation of 2 new units, the maintenance group and also professional staff, as they started going through the negotiations, we have to be very, very careful on changing those conditions because we could be in violation of changing practices. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Moving on. So the following slides are President Minner's priorities that are basically aligned with our strategic goals as well. Next slide. So first one is obviously to address the HLC concerns and continue to push on what we've been doing on main campus and also off campus as well. He changed the 4,500 goal from 2020 to 2021 due to the probation and the delays associated with addressing those issues. Number 3 is to achieve a 6-year graduation rate equal to the institution or sector. So a quick question is, and I'll go to the people online and pull you guys in. How many of you of the four comprehensive institutions, that's Eastern, Western, Highlands, and Northern, who do you think has the highest fall-to-fall retention? And those in the online, if you could give me an idea, who do you think it is?
This is Patricia. Western?
Western?
I'd say
Nope.
Eastern.
Eastern. Yes, it's Eastern. And then number 2?
Probably the West then.
Western? Okay, yep. Number 3?
Highlands.
Anyone else?
Let's say Northern and then
I would
Highlands.
say New Mexico Tech.
It's Northern and then Highlands. New Mexico Tech is considered a research field. Thank you for the answers. So Highlands is the lowest fall-to-fall retention. And there's a difference between us and Eastern of almost 4%. We've been hovering right around 52. Eastern and has been right around 58. And so for every 1%, that's $150,000. So if we got close to these numbers, we're probably picking up $1 million if we got to with our peers. This is an effort that we could do on main campus and also in our centers. And that's where you as staff members have an impact, because you're one of those touch points that keep those students coming back to us. So this is an area that we have to continue to increase. We still are an open enrollment institution. You could solve this problem by increasing this graduation rate or even the retention rate by just increasing and putting a minimum ACT or SAT score. You increase that, it's real easy, the numbers are gonna go up. But because the institution chooses to be an open enrollment, we have to try to help these students, and that's where I think makes Highlands unique. Not because we could not do this, it's because we choose not to do it and try to help those students that maybe not be able to make it at another institution that may have those criteria. So we applaud your efforts, but this is something that we need to work on. Number 4, we've had a lot of issues about compensation. And
Matt?
President, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Tina from International Ed. So in regards to the number 3 that you were just discussing, I understand that we are a truly open enrollment institution, and all the other schools that are supposedly open enrollment have their minimum standards for admission. And so I think their minimum standards are a bit higher than ours. So why can't we, as maybe not out there, but internally, we know that we admit lots of students that are below those minimum standards at the other schools. Why can't we count them and just say, okay, this is what we're thinking, that the students that come in at lower than those other schools, we're either going to have to work harder to retain them, or we just kind of know that we're not going to retain them.
It's an institutional decision. So let me ask you this, Tina. Are you asking, should we change our admission standards and maybe have some criteria that?
No, what I'm saying is that for our own benefit and for us to keep track, we know what the enrollment standards are at the other schools. For example, I think Eastern has a minimum GPA of 2.5 and has a SAT of something or other. So we don't have that. We basically admit anybody that has a 2.0, and then we don't require SAT. So anybody that has a below at whatever Eastern's minimums are, we can have those numbers internally just to know that we're going to have to work harder to keep these students, or what can we do to keep these students, but also in the back of our mind, kind of keep track of if we're not keeping them because of their GPAs in the first semester, second semester, or because they're just not coming back.
Okay.
It's not solving the problem. It's just finding out why.
Thank you for the explanation, but I'm not, are you asking me a particular question? Well, I like what you stated, but I'm not sure.
It's an idea so that we can figure out why our retention numbers are lower than the other schools. And we have the facts.
I think just taking a stab at it, but I think there are people like much more than I am, like Buddy, that have looked at some of this data, and Dr. Martinez, Edward Martinez. But I think some of it is because we are open enrollment and we are taking students in that are below a 2.0 or maybe 1.5 or some of those other criteria. And therefore they need an additional services. And so I guess you could allocate more dollars for academic support or some of those other programs that can help boost those students so that we can retain them or be more attentive and intervene in their lives so we keep them on track rather than admitting them and then kind of letting them figure out the college process. So there's some techniques and programs out there that could probably help us address some of those needs. And I know that Edward in our group or the university is signed up for HLC's Persistent Academy. So we're learning a bunch of best practices that we could hopefully bring back to main campus to maybe address some of those students or some of those ideas that you mentioned in your comments. Hopefully that helped.
It did, thanks.
Thank you. Other questions? So going to number 4 about this compensation, President Minner wants to establish a compensation that is from our professional staff to our faculty to our maintenance staff, that is a program that we can all look to and say, okay, this is where my staff is at, this is what we have to do to get our staff to a higher level or maintain current market levels. So he really wants us to develop something so that we don't have this year-to-year debate about, hey, well, let's just go across the board a 2% or a 1% or something like that. Really have a truly meaningful compensation package that takes care of those positions that are in high demand, also recognize those increases from year to year. But that's what his intent is on number 4. Questions on that point? Next slide, please. Thank you. Number 6, during our first presentation of this goal or priority, we had some confusion. And basically, if we take some programs and move them to online, such as the social work or spaces that we actually lease, social work, Santa Fe, Farmington, and others, if you move them towards online programs, then what's the need for having those centers? So that's going to be a discussion and debate over this next year, and we need to take a look at it. We only have 2 programs that you can actually sign up that are completely online and have been approved by HLC and the other accrediting bodies, which is nursing and also our MBA program. So we're really behind in this particular area, and we can probably move to get more of our programs online. But it's really to look at reducing our lease space costs on our centers. We spend, I think it's 50 grand or right around there in Farmington. We spend 90 grand in Santa Fe. We spend 385,000 in Rio Rancho. And I think Albuquerque is like 170 grand. That's a lot of dollars that we spend for those particular spaces. However, we do get students that attend those campuses and do help our numbers. Going on to number 7, high impact practices. We like to, right now we did receive some money as part of our endowment, so we get a spinoff of probably about $60,000 a year that we could utilize toward these high impact practices. And this is an area that we use that is being led by our Center of Teaching Excellence. So we want to continue to push that. We want to try to create a 21st century career services. This is where our students leave Highlands and are familiar with logging into a system, putting up their resume, utilizing the tools that are available for them, resume builders and such, and also placement so that the students that are working for us, transforming how they go to work. They apply to your campus jobs. They dress appropriately, do interviews. So we prep them for the real world. So when they graduate and they go out to their first interview, they want to be prepared. Also using a program for onboarding, putting their application online and being familiar with some of those tools. And then going on to number 9, these are primarily having to deal with the foundation. So this development of this Highlands Institute, the president wants to seek some donors to basically create a pool about $500,000. And these programs that will get funded out of those will be some creative entrepreneur, and it's just not a faculty, it also could be a staff. Like some of the practices would be at one of his prior schools in Radford, President Minter talked about, they funded a zombie camp, which is 2 weeks. They came in, students paid for it. They paid the instructors, they went on a field trip, they learned about contagious diseases, they learned about how do you build a movie about zombies. There was a lot of how-to and kind of instructional things, but we could do maybe programming camps or maybe some painting classes or something that is normally a non-traditional type program, that if it works for three years or so and it's self-sustaining, why don't we just keep it going? So we want to try to find some seed monies to fund those initiatives. Moving on to number B, the track. We've just got money to replace the football field that's in progress right now. Once that's done, that'll last for 15 years at least. But the track is in really dire situation. If you've been there, you can kind of see the bubbles, and we can't hold any meets. It's really becoming a hazard for our student athletes. And then we need to increase our corpus for the foundation. It's about $6 to $7 million, and we should be somewhere right around $13 to $15 million. That's where it should be. So all those efforts of donating we need to continue that push on there. So I have any questions under these slides? This last slide. Okay.
Matt?
Yes, go ahead.
Going back to number 4 in the priorities, we had done that HASTE study some time back for salaries and compensation and all those kind of things, and salary levels, and whatever happened with that? Are we going to use any of that to get this done?
So the question Angela had was, we had performed one of these compensation studies several years ago, and can we use that data to just augment and go from there? I think when we did that study was by using the Hay group, and you're supposed to keep that data updated from year to year and adjust the salary tables. And we had not been doing that, so we're basically at least 6-7 years out of sync of that particular program. So most organizations would come in and tell you that you probably need to relook at those areas again. But I think when we did it last time, I think we pushed a lot of information over to HR and to this group, and the feedback that I got is employees felt that their positions or the job descriptions were not really evaluated, and therefore left a bitterness with individuals. And so we do this, it's got to be a very open and transparent process that says, this is the company, this is what we're paying for, this is the scope of work that we want them to execute. And so we really want to have something that's not only for this year, but also for the future. We don't want to go through what we did a couple of years ago and just create an unrest with everyone. And with that, they'll look at our classes of employees. We have this in the system that I've seen, like administrative assistants. We have probably 7 or 8 different titles that are out there, all for the same job. And so we need to clean up some of that. We also need to look at the experiences and also the requirements for each job. So that takes a little bit of time, and that's what he was talking about, making sure that once we have that solid base of what people are doing and they're classified correctly, then we go on to the next phase of saying, okay, what is the compensation, and then who are we comparing it to? Are we comparing it to the local base? Are we comparing it to the statewide base? Or are we comparing it to the national base? And each level is a different level of compensation. If you used all the job positions and compared it nationally, and you compared it to back east, there's no way that we could afford it. So we have to look at what kind of jobs are going to be really a local-based peer analysis. Okay, hopefully that answered it, Angela.
Yeah, I'm just kind of, you know, if we went back and we did this again, and so none of what we did is any good anymore. But I'm wondering, when they determine what a salary is now, are they not using any of that information, or where is that coming from now? Because I just wonder, because it always takes a while for them to be, the way they say it, banded. So I thought that's how they were doing it. So if that is totally out of date by anything more than 5 years, it seems that even the salary levels that we're coming up with now are incorrect then. So, and once we do this study, if we don't have the money to pay people what it turns out, because that's happened in many cases before, then it's really a hard goal to have or priority. It's a great one, but I don't know how we'll reach it.
I think we have to do is have it a little bit more transparent. And really, if we select a vendor or go out, then we've got to really define what we're trying to accomplish out of that study. I think the last time we did it was, oh, our payment schedule is way out of whack and we're off market and some people are getting paid more than others. And so we really, I think as part of this budget process, is really open it up and say, okay, we select a company. This is what we're asking the company to do. To classify all our positions? Or are we asking them to look at our existing classifications and get it to the market? Or are we asking them to do a kit and caboodle, look at every job description, make sure it's current and valid and relevant, and then start those other process? So all of that takes time and resources. And so I think at this particular stage is we've got to start somewhere by saying, let's look and define that criteria, and then let's look at the next phase. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. Other questions?
Hey, Max,
Yes.
you talk salaries and, you know, like for instance, in the library, we have a few vacancies. On the salary savings, can you use that since it's like for that 1 year, can you use it like a bonus or anything? Or are you just gonna get all the salaries and use it for the shortages that we're experiencing now because of the state revenue?
So the question that Ruben asked, okay, so if you have some salary savings, could those salary savings be utilized to then go back and give certain employees some bonuses within their department? Or are those funds just swept and used for building up the reserves or the shortfalls within the revenues? So currently we're using those shortfalls to shore up our reserves and the shortfalls. Getting into bonuses when if you don't really have a compensation study or you don't have criteria that is measurable for an employee to achieve a bonus, it's very difficult because then you can get yourself into a legal issue because if it's very subjective, then you're going to say, well, I believe I met it, and you say, well, as a supervisor, I don't believe you did. Now we've got an employee that may have been a very productive employee now is very bitter because they didn't get this dollars. So when you get into the bonus or those types of levels, then you got to determine what the criteria is. You've got to have a really solid job description, and they've got to have all the tools and skill sets necessary to achieve that goal, to therefore achieve that bonus. Now, if in a department, if there's some staff and they're having to take on additional responsibilities that have been shared, then sometimes we can do supplementals to help augment because they're having to handle more of the workload outside of what they're normally doing. But that's based on a one-on-one basis. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for that, Ruben. Thank you. Hearing none. Here's our timelines. We're basically completing the fifth bullet down this afternoon. All the feedback and budget priorities have to be back to the deans and VP by October 6th. That's what, 2 weeks away, maybe 2 weeks or so. So please get this information. All requests are due to my office by the 13th because we got to now make sure we formulate them. And then right around that November 9th to 10th, we'll have that executive team meeting and we'll start going over our budget priorities. And then right around this time, we're looking at it in the morning, I think it is, Yvonne?
Yes.
In the morning, we're gonna present to the campus an update with some of those priorities. And then we're gonna present those priorities to the Board of Regents on the December 5th board meeting. Our whole goal this year is try to wrap up our budget for fiscal year 19 by early February. So that means we'll have discussion with the board on tuition and fees. Obviously, we're probably not going to get any money from the state. So why wait till May? Might as well just figure out that tuition and fees that helps the recruitment and department and other departments. So we want to try to kick out our budget by the first part of the calendar year. Next slide. The documents you can get on our website. Just do us one favor when you're submitting your budget form. Please submit in this kind of format. So abbreviate your department like EOS dash or ITS dash, your organization dash, the date dash who's submitting it, and then put a dash V1 or something. What happens is last year we were getting a bunch of the documents and then someone would forget something like, oh, heck, I forgot to change this number. And then they submit it again and we're like looking, is it this one or this one? So if you put it by that version, it helps us try to figure out what's the most current version. Last year we also had a couple of cases where we presented some numbers and people saying, that's not the right number. I sent you a different spreadsheet and we looked and it came as a different name or the same name. So that will help our office try to categorize all these reports. Okay, all these submissions, I should say. With that, thank you, and additional questions that you may have. Online, do you have questions? Got quite a few people there. Wow. Yeah, we got a lot.
Hey Max, what about work studies? Programs passed where the money is all now centralized with HR or in your office, but I kind of see it in the library as a way of retention. You know, a lot of students are barely able to afford their tuition and everything, and having a job on campus as a worthwhile thing. Are there additional funds going to go into the work study program, or can you kind of talk a little bit about the work study program?
Sure. So Ruben asked, how are we funding the work studies? And can you get additional work studies dollars? So we've made commitments to the students during the FY17 increase in tuition and 16 that every student that wishes to have a job, would have one. So the work studies are at a centralized, except for a couple areas like in the programs 150 or 200, which are typically your auxiliaries, athletics, and those student and cultural programs. But we kind of monitor those programs, and we're still committed to offering work study jobs. So in those particular programs, such as Student and Cultural Services, Campus Life, KDP, ILFELD, and some of those we'll continue to monitor and move dollars in if we need to. But for the regular departments, those are ING, so programs 100 through 140. Those, there's not a limitation on them. So if you need more workstations, just continue to hire the students. We just want to make sure that they have some job, they're doing some kind of work, and they're just not there idle. Okay, so if you need some more, just continue and don't worry about it. As we monitor the budget, we move dollars in there to cover it. Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Others online, other questions? Okie doke. Have a wonderful afternoon, and if there's still burning questions, feel free to contact my office. We'll be happy to sit with you or go into more depth if you have some or you need some additional information. Okay, thank you.